Hello, it's Michael. It's week 8. Thank you guys for all your hard work. This week we actually started to see something visual, meaning that yes, you could probably show this to just a normal person and get feedback on all the work that you did so far. And to that end, I just wanted to recap a little bit of what the work is so far. If you go back to week 1, you all were pretty confident about what signage was for and how you get around, and also how these containers, how important they were, the what containers concept from McManus, and or just the concept of how you can link across and through and connect things together from Weinberger. So all those things you might have thought were pretty abstract, but hopefully this week I hope is your aha moment. And it's a great time to have this aha moment as we go into the final. And not only the final, next week we finally get that thing I've been promising, which is you're going to understand some metadata, which is mainly the role of identity. If you know who someone is, you have a better chance of doing different kinds of sorting and filtering than you normally would on a database. And number 2, you're going to start to see the ability to manage massive amounts of data through a service that you're going to choose. And I might work with you guys, since there's so many different paths that you're taking, but each of those services is going to have all the familiar items that hopefully now are becoming clear. Now, one thing I don't think that's completely clear is when you started this, you all are individuals, you all are doing your project individually. What I hope becomes maybe more obvious this week is that you're all solving pretty much the same problem. So there you go. Let that sink in. So the more variation I see here, the more I try to counsel you that there really isn't a lot of variation at this point. In fact, if you're ever intimidated, I can just show you a quick nifty trick. Is you remember this guy? This is maybe what you could put on your screen if you really were, kind of just, hey, here's a database, right? And databases are cool. You have the ability to sort and filter. Usually that's something I can sort by any element that I wish, just by clicking on it. And these are things that people have as a convention. And this is really what's interesting. There are lots of conventions. We looked last week at navigation. All those are conventions. Conventions that have just been maybe some are new-ish, but most of them words on a screen that you click on. And that's why I asked the question about how do you know something is clickable, because that's really kind of the challenge of this week. And this week is actually where everything gets separated out. And we're going to talk about flow. But before I do that, let me just show you a little trick. Hey, here's a database full of stuff where all you started. And this isn't from your class, but it's about films, I guess. Well, it should just be all films, but just so happens it's about one. I'm just going to add a gallery view. And I just did it a second ago. So gallery view of the database will give you pretty much what you guys have already come up with. A little bit, right? Like you've already got the idea that there's some sort of card. Cards are pretty popular just because of the different amount of screen real estate people have. But condensing this and making it easy to browse is definitely something that's the goal this week. So this kind of makes it for you. It actually doesn't do a terrible job of doing some hierarchy, right? Like I guess this title is more important than this. It's also very selective in some ways about being able to do I need some sort of indicator of what this means. So it's the name value pair problem that you guys have had. Well, maybe you're thinking about it, right? What do you need to show? What is real data that's understandable versus stuff that you really need to explain? I'd say, this is very nice of them, actually. It's all very nice, and that's why I said I don't want you to kind of get too overwhelmed by drawing things in Figma, or even just what's the goal here is actually it's all this stuff. The goal is all these words. Now, this all has to do with being a database administrator, whereas this all has to do with wayfinding in a bunch of information that you're not familiar with. So that's why at the very top of the screen, normally this sort of hierarchy is Where am I and what can I go? What can I do? And every one of these words is really my focus, and it's the focus of people who are going to go to the site. They kind of are used to the fact that there's some sort of display that can be manipulated, and therefore there's maybe a concept of either navigation at the side level or maybe even underneath here. You can put it kind of wherever you want, as long as you're making it clear, hey, is this what you want? Is this something interesting to you? And let's see, this is, I think Nell's done this. Yeah. Yeah, Nelly. We're going to get into this week this idea of flow. How do you get around? How do you see more or less? This might be maybe 2 or 3 of your fields from your database, and this might be the rest of them. So one thing that's super popular we're going to do in a flow is the detail view back to the normal view and not going anywhere. This is the concept of where these pop-ups or things that open or close or something like that come from, because you don't really want to leave this context. You might have gone to some effort actually to filter things out. So this is one flow. So when we get to this week, and let me do that, get to flow, we're going to learn, first of all, we're going to, as always, I'm just going to try to get a way for you to think about the flow. And so therefore, where am I? There we go. So this week we're in this area called storyboarding. And many of you have already tried this. My concept for a storyboard is written out in the assignment description, which is due at the end of the week. You're going to submit the link to, hopefully it's a place in like Figma. I guess you could put it someplace else. It isn't going to be here. Just remember, this is just to get feedback. And by the way, it doesn't hurt to show people or look at other people's work, because originality, I hate to say, is not a big deal in this. The originality comes from the words. All the words that you've worked on for the past 8 weeks are what is important. The topics can change, but the words and the placement, the hierarchies, I hope you get it now. This is the aha moment. Like, that's what's important. The design is actually fairly standardized in many ways. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. So first thing I want to do is have you think of a flow. And the flow exercise is this little shorthand that I like because it's easy. It kind of gets away from some of the boxes and arrows that sometimes are very hard to read, or I just don't like them too much. This is easy. It's like, what do you see and what can you do? And what you should start with is inside a view of your data. And then basically, how do I change my view to another view of data? That's interesting, right? So you can click on something and all the data should change. So we're still working out that a storyboard goes one click at a time. Can you tell something's clickable? That was why that question was there. So make sure that things have either a placement. I think that was one of the areas only 1 or 2 of you mentioned, which is placement on the screen actually makes a big difference to whether or not it's clickable. Also, it shouldn't move, which is another kind of hallmark of things that are clickable. And so look at that. We don't need color necessarily, but we do want to see how do you get around. And I'd say going into and out of a detail view is very important. You just saw an example from Nelly. You can have a pop-up. That's fine. Or you can go to a full page and then try to go backwards. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. But I will tell you that in the analysis, your final analysis, and toward the end of your analysis, you're going to talk about flow. Getting around this data is really actually another huge job, just like putting up signs on a highway and how do you communicate different choices that the person can make. You want to make those super clear as well as effective to let the person achieve their goals. That's what we've learned. Okay, so we've practiced all this stuff. What I hope you don't get into is that you all have to somehow solve this in a different way. Really, the work was all done prior to this. What is the hierarchy? How is that represented in your records so that people know what it is you're representing? And secondly, how do you get around? What are the navigation choices needed in order to fulfill some kind of goal? Not necessarily can I search your database, because you could just go back here and you could just give them your table. Remember, it's like this could be your interface. It's not very common. And then you can probably tell it's not necessarily affording you any kind of, it's really just a data dump, in some ways. You're giving this a lot of value in your efforts as a information architect. And the study that you're going to make next, coming up, is even going to be more impactful as to what are the stories that you tell with data that you will enter. And we'll get to that next week. So lots of fun wrapping up this assignment. Hopefully you get that and are having some fun now that you might not worry so much about some of the tools and some of the goals of these things. I hope it's clearer. If not, I'm here. Thanks.